Well, good evening, and it's an absolute pleasure to be back online. And I have two of our favourites back again. We have Paul McLaughlin and Jeremy Cooper. And this evening we are going on a little distillery tour, and we're taking you off to Glenfarclas. Sorry. So I shall bring the guys in. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Great. How are you making it?
Good. Very good. How are you, Jeremy?
Very well indeed. And hope everyone's had a good Christmas.
Indeed, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year tomorrow. So, yes, Glenfarclas. So Glenfarclas is in Speyside. It is, I know it's a personal favourite distillery of mine. I know you guys have got a bit of an affinity to it as well. Before we jump into the whiskey, though, I'd just like to say that Glenfarclas, it means the Valley of the Green Grass. So there we go. If you didn't know that, it's the Valley of the Green Grass. Owned by the Grant family. It has 6 large stills, which are the largest on Speyside, and they're heated directly by gas burners. Produces about 3.5 million litres of spirit every year, and they've got about 68,000 casks maturing on site, ranging from every year from 1953 up until now. So one of the reasons I love Glenfarclas is I do love a sherry cask, and they are a beautiful sherry whiskey. So I have a 25-year-old in my glass just now. Paul, I know you have a 25. I know Jeremy has got.
Yeah.
Good man. So how are both of you? You well?
Yes, thank goodness. Tier 4 now. We've just well, to explain to Paul, who's over in Canada, we've just been to join our London colleagues in the highest tier for COVID-19 as of midnight tonight. You basically, most of the British Isles, in fact, in Scotland as well, you can't go anywhere, and all the shops are closed and everything. We've in real lockdown.
Yeah. Hey, we can go to Glenfarclas, though. Nobody's stopping that tonight.
Yes.
And I'm not even wearing a mask.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. Well, if you're drinking I'm going to be drinking 60% plus. It'll kill the virus anyway. So what are we worried about?
Absolutely. So you've got the 25 in your glass, Paul, yeah?
Yes, I just poured a little bit. It's final bottle from about 4 years ago. Go into it from time to time, usually when we have company over. And I was saying earlier that it cost me 123 Canadian when I bought it 4 years ago. And a 25-year-old Scotch whiskey in Canada for $120. That's robbery. I mean, I don't know what it is now. It's not available at our bottle stores anymore, but I'm sure it's running in the 200s to 300s Canadian. But what a deal when it was there at the time.
That sounds about right. I think over here it's about £125. To be honest, even at that, that's still a steal for a 25-year-old whiskey. There are very few you could get at that. And it's a beautiful nose.
I find Glenfarclas for me always been, I don't know, that quintessential Scotch whiskey. I don't know why. It's reigned as being like an older but flavorful whiskey from minute one. And the character of it for me has always been there. In different balances, of course, throughout the expressions. But absolutely, when I think. Some people go to the Glenlivet for old style or traditional Scotch whiskey, and Glenfarclas just smacks me.
Yeah. So what are you getting on the nose there?
Oh, I'm getting some. I still smell the spirit, the Glenfarclas spirit, which is great for 25. I'm getting some oak, absolutely. Surprisingly enough, I'm getting some tree fruits there, but it's kind of going down the hidey hole of sherry. And I'm getting some of the Christmas spices and getting some plums, getting a little bit of black currant. Certainly nothing overpowering, very balanced.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Vic often talks about the issue and the problem with reading other tasting notes and then sampling yourself, because you'll always then pick it up. But a while ago, I remember reading somebody else's comments saying there was a bit of menthol on the nose, and I didn't get that before, but I now get that every time. Just a slight kind of menthol.
The power of suggestion, I'm telling you.
And now when I drink mouthwash, I taste whiskey. So there we go.
See, that's the problem I've had. I've said this before. Then when you start talking about menthol and anything that's along the mints, I sometimes have trouble with it. I said many times before, I enjoy being a dentist, but I like to split the differences between what I do as a dentist and what I do as a spirits consultant. And in my brain, when I smell mint, when I smell anything like that, I think work. I think toothpaste, and it kind of just drags you down that work, that dental work kind of thing. And a lot of things I avoid with menthol or with spearmint or peppermint in terms of whiskeys or other drinks, because it kind of throws me back into the dental side of my life. And although I enjoy it, I don't like to do it after 5.
Quite right. So that's the 25-year-old. Very, very nice. It's sitting at 43%. This was gifted to me, this bottle, actually, and I've taken a couple of years just slowly going through it, but I've now reached that point in the bottle where I'm now at about a third. So I'm going to have to finish it off fairly soon, I think. Don't want to leave that too much longer. But it's a beautiful whiskey. Jeremy.
I'm just interested to follow on that point, and it's an interesting one about the mintiness. I mean, I'm a bit older, and maybe Paul will remember. I was brought up. The first dental smell was Sedinol, as it was in those days, and Calzinol. It became Calzigen and all these other names, but it was Calzinol and Sedinol, which was full of cloves. And whenever I smell cloves, I mean, most people will think of a dentist, certainly of my generation, even if you weren't a dentist. It's a smell you don't smell so much of nowadays. But it's true that there are some whiskies you come across and you can smell that almost clove note, and it does kind of, oh, right, yes, and it makes you think a lot about work.
Indeed.
We hate those whiskies. So what am I going to begin with today? Well, I'm a great lover of the unusual, and you guys I know have brought to the table some excellent whiskies. And it's interesting, I was discussing with Paul about the 25-year-old, and I was saying that I think it's superb, and Paul will come to his favourites later, but I think it's an excellent whiskey for the money. And as you rightly said, how many 25-year-olds can you get to that price? And I mean, Costco had it a few years ago for like £90. It was a steal. And I just think it, it is fairly mass produced, and they do have some of the biggest stills, if not the biggest stills in Scotland, Glenfarclas. But it's just a superb whiskey, and it's very rich. And I think pound for pound for what you're getting is a better one. And even if you prefer some of the other takings, I think it's a fabulous whiskey and excellent. So what am I drinking? Well, this one's an interesting one. It's called. Actually, I don't like the label. And there you are. It's drinks by the dram. It really does seem cheap, and it's you can get this actually on Masters of Malt, and it's interesting because look at the colour. This is not the colour of any Glenfarclas whiskey.
Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on. Sorry, Jeremy. That's what I meant to do. Sorry.
Incredibly pale. Now, Glenfarclas are renowned for using first fill sherry butts. Jose Miguel Martin is where they get them from. And it's like Macallan have their particular sherry butts that they use, but this is where Glenfarclas. But I don't know where they got this one, because If I know, if maybe someone's going to ring me up from Drinks by the Dram or when they bottle this, but this has not been put in a first fill sherry, but it can't be. It's got to be a refill and probably a second refill. I would have thought by the colour of it, which means that it's very unusual because it's a whopping 58.7%, so it's cask. But I have to say, when you do smell it, you can smell the, I suppose, typical notes of a, although lighter, I would say, of a Glenfarclas whiskey. There is a nose of raisins and everything else, and you get the chocolate and coming through, and certainly that when you actually, besides the first rush of that alcohol, you start actually tasting something which I haven't tasted in most Glenfarclas, bananas. And that's the overpowering thing. Yes, there's some, most of the time with Glenfarclas whiskey, you get the Christmas. That's why it's so suitable to talk about Glenfarclas today, because you get that Christmas cake, and particularly with my other drams, that really is overpowering. But this one, less so. A bit of chocolate in there, but it's very different. And they say that actually it is a refill cask where you're getting more of, you know, less of the sherry, if you like, which is so typical of Glenfarclas, and you're getting more of the barrel and the taste of the whiskey, and maybe that's true. I will say to Paul, notice Vic is listening in, that, and I would just say I'm an amateur in compared to these gentlemen, a keen amateur, but it's fabulous. And yes, you get the bit of plums and damsons coming into the finish, but it's absolutely very, very strange because of the colour, and it really does not look like a Glenfarclas whiskey, any of them. I've you know, that's why I'd recommend anyone to actually buy it. And it was a collaboration between Drinks by the Dram and Masters of Malt. So go online if you're interested and purchase. It's not crazily expensive either for a cask strength malt, but one that's unusual. And if you like Glenfarclas, it's just a bit different to many of its brothers. So that's what I'm starting with, and we'll move on in a wee while. But that's a new kid on the block. There you go.
What do you have there, Paul? What are you comparing there?
Well, that's the 25, and this is the 21. So
okay.
You got me thinking about the colors and stuff. And the 25 is certainly a little lighter than the 21 is, which I find kind of interesting. Now, the thing is that the little less pour in the glass are not both the same. No, I don't think Glenfarclas uses any kind of caramel coloring, do they? Are we aware of that?
Absolutely. I'm 99% certain. No. I mean, I'm going to be quite bold with that. And if I do, I'll fall to the foot of my stairs, as you say. But no way. I've never heard that.
Yeah, they don't seem like a company that would use it. I've never looked it up. I don't really mind caramel in my whiskey one way or the other. It doesn't. I'm not a potato to say that I noted in there. And I am a sucker for the color of a whiskey, whether it's light or dark. But you know, I was saying to Jeremy that the 25 for me, I feel is good and a great price. When it comes to Glenfarclas, for me, the sweet spot is around 18 to 21 years old. And I am a fan of the 21 and the 18 as well.
It's very interesting you say that, Paul. I mean, this one, you were talking to me about the oakiness, perhaps, of the 25-year-old. And I must admit, with these drinks, I was just, and perhaps you're talking about suggestive, you mentioned that, and I'm just thinking this particular one, because it is lighter, that oak comes out much more than my regular Glenfarclas whiskies. So, yeah, and maybe that is the power of suggestion. You were saying before that you've got me thinking about it. Yeah, I can certainly it got a bit of oakiness, but maybe because that is, as far as I'm concerned, a refill cask unless somebody can prove otherwise. But the colour of it is almost like a rosé wine. So yeah. But, so what are you testing that, Mike, the 21-year-old or not?
I don't have the 21. No, I had the 25. So
I'm interested. I haven't had the 21-year-old, and had most of Glenfarclas's production. What do you rate it for? You prefer it?
21. I like the 21. It's high marks for me for sure, because you get those, what we say the crispest flavors from the Glenfarclas, and you do get a touch of oak, but you also get that sprightliness from the spirit as well. For me, I find that the 21 has just enough of everything to make it a good, easy, but complex whiskey as well. Because you can sit with this, and every sniff or as the glass goes down, you get another little character out of it, and it's nothing that really hits you too hard to throw you off. Just enough to give you a little bit of everything, and it's sometimes it's people say, well, it's a little bit of everything, then it's no good at anything, and I think that's untrue, especially when it comes to whiskey, because when you start developing or a character profile for a whiskey, one of the fun things about it is, okay, I smell that, I like that, or I taste that, I don't like it. What else is in there? And whether you're taking suggestions from somebody else, or if you're finding yourself as you're moving through the glass, that journey, that exploration is a lot of fun. And the Glenfarclas 2118 gives me more layers of flavor than you might expect. And once again, at the price point, you can't go wrong with it.
And it seems that Vic agrees with us, doesn't he? That he doesn't think they use colour, and I was saying that absolutely not. Yeah, I think it would alter my whole perspective if I found that. I trust them at, like, untouched. They haven't been taken over by the big boys, and they are the Grant family, which gets very complex because you've got Grant, you've got the name of Grant in other things and other whiskies. So yes, Glen Grant, for example. So yes, it's funny that their whiskey is called Glenfarclas and it's owned by the Grant family.
Well, you say it's easy to right now. There's no Glenfarclas in the bottle shops around my place. And there had been for quite some time. So the bottles I'm sitting on have been here for a couple of years. They're gifted to me. I'm assuming that you can get it in bottle shops, and you were saying you can get it at Costco as well, or not Costco? Costco? Yeah,
Costco did the 25, but not the 21. I dare say that will be from the Whiskey Exchange or Masters of Malt. Are two of my favourite. The Whiskey Barrel. There's a good number of them.
Mm-hmm. The problem I have sometimes is, being in different parts of the world, of course, and having different laws relating to the sale and shipping of whiskey. One of the most frustrating things for me is when we have these beautiful whiskeys being talked about in the UK or Scotland. Some of the ones coming out of Europe, I can't get my hands on them. Yeah, it's like, oh, I really want to try that, and it's like, no, can't get it in Eastern Canada. Well, now, we do have bottle shops that'll ship within Canada itself, but once again, you're looking at limited quantities, and by the time you hear about it, it's typically snatched up, and you can't get it.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, one of the best whiskies, and I was heartbroken, was a 15-year-old Glenfarclas from the Whiskey Exchange. It's gone. It's finished. At cask strength. Magnificent, not crazily priced. And I was heartbroken when I found that had gone. And that happens, you're really into something and buy a few bottles and then you find it's gone. That's why, the 25-year-old I like. Perhaps I like that oakiness at the end of it. And you try different ones, and That's the problem with my habit of buying these sometimes one-off bottles, or they're there for a time. So, but it's intriguing that you get that contrast of, yes, you'll always get the 12-year-old, you get the 21-year-old, you get the 25-year-old, easily repeatable. But I do like to push the boundaries out, but the problem is that they're unique, and I'm going to come to one in a minute, which is unique, not direct from the distillery, and is probably my favourite whiskey, probably of all time. But we'll come to that in a second.
Yeah, let's have a little sample of the 105 next. You've got the 105, Paul, yes?
Indeed, I do.
Excellent. Now, I just experienced, I guess, a wee problem that comes about from time to time. I've had this bottle for a few years now, and I've just been slowly going through it, and I've got the dreaded floaty cork that just came off as I took it out. It just snapped off and down it went. So later on, I'll need to siphon the whiskey out of this and probably decant it into a finished bottle, which is a little frustrating. But if I leave the cork in there, it will interfere with the taste if I don't get that out. So I'll need to get it out.
You could finish the bottle tonight, Mike.
I could. Well, at 60%, I think even the most hardened Scottish stomach would struggle with that. But this is what I like to call my April the 15th whiskey, and I bring it out on April the 15th because that's the 105th day of the year. So as good a reason as any to drink.
Well, you know what? I tell you, sometimes we just reach for that reason, don't we? So the 105 is the release that I have is actually 10 years old. Is yours the same?
I am not sure. How can I tell from this?
So on the front, it has the 105 on it, of course, but on the back, it actually has it listed there.
Okay. No, this is not.
Yeah, so I've been sitting on that bottle probably for 4 or 5 years as well.
Yeah.
But now I do have the 50th anniversary, which is aged 22 years.
Okay.
I haven't opened that yet. That's going to be opened on a bit of a special occasion because it was that bottle was destined for Israel and wound up in Alberta, and I managed to get my hands on it. So I got a couple people interested in dropping into that one at one point. We'll pop that open at a later date. It's going to be interesting to have, the 105 that's been aged that long. And I want to save some of this 10-year-old 105 to put up against it to see where it goes.
Okay. The story is quite interesting. It was George Grant apparently decided to bottle a cask of Glenfarclas at cask strength as a Christmas gift for family and friends.
Yeah.
And that's where it came from, and it was 105 British proof.
They started that back in '68, wasn't it?
There you go. That's your distinction point there.
Oh, I do like Glenfarclas. The 105, it's got a little more punchiness to it. Absolutely. But you know what? It does take water quite well. That's one thing I learned about having a few drinks with some of my Scottish friends. We were sitting around, I think it was like 2:45 in the morning, and we were cracking into a cask strength whiskey with a gentleman from Islay. And of course he had his glass, and then he opened up some water and popped some water to it. Someone asked him, so why do you put water in your whiskey unless you've been doing it all night? You want to change the flavors? Are you approaching the whiskey a different way? And his simple answer was, just lasts longer when I put water in it. So, okay.
Absolutely. That's why I like if you've got a hip flask for a wedding or a function, always put cask strength in, because it's like taking diluting juice to the party. You've got more drink to last you the night.
That's a great flask whiskey. Yeah, and the 105 would be as well if it was available on market.
Yeah, indeed. There you go, man.
There you go. Interesting with
No.
is that both my son's weddings in the last couple of years, I took all the whiskey to the wedding. And there's a good number of guests, over 100 or 300 odd.
You took all your whiskey.
Well, I took a lot of whiskey, and
wow, that's brave.
Single bottle, bar the 25-year-old. I did take a 25-year-old. I always bought distillery-owned bottles or anything, unique bottles, because one thing about whiskey is to enjoy with friends. And I think at a family occasion, whether it's Christmas, whether it's wedding or anything else, you can't take anything with you. Share it with your friends.
As long as they appreciated it and it wasn't just, I'll have that one with Coke.
You know what? Appreciating things. Yeah, I'm great. I do like to drink whiskey with friends.
Taking the whiskey to the wedding, Jeremy, must have cost more than the wedding.
It was a few thousand quid. Yeah, I mean, bottles, ridiculous. And I'm kind of known about it, and I've done it with my nephews and things, and taken a few bottles with, and it's all gone down well. But with my boys, you know what, like young lads in their 20s or something, and they've got a bit of a taste for whiskey. They're very knowledgeable. Even my daughter's knowledgeable because we've been going up to Speyside now for 30. Well, my son's 30 years of age, just over. So he's been going since he was knee high to a grasshopper, and they know their whiskey, and obviously to give his friends a good dram is true. But I love the 105. I think it's fabulous.
It's a real sherry punch to it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. My next whiskey actually is a marriage of casks.
Just before you move on, Jeremy, next time there's a Cooper family wedding, give Paul and I an Audi.
In fact, we're all locked down with COVID, and hopefully Paul's going to come. And we've talked before about the Dentist Whiskey Appreciation Society, your baby, of doing a mix of dentistry and a bit of whiskey. And we've got some companies, I'm sure, that will hopefully join us. And so I hope at some stage to be able to bring a few bottles to share with friends. There's nothing better.
Yeah.
That very much is the plan. We had plans to host a dental course at potentially Auchentoshan Distillery. We had laid out where we were going to have a dinner, some of the topics for the dental discussions. I think that will still happen. Whether it's this year or next year, I'm not sure. But we have also had this discussion about having a dentistry Speyside conference, which I think would just be superb. It really would.
Yeah, I'm all for that. I'll be on my way now if it wasn't Tier 4.
Well, I'd be trying to jump the line for the vaccine if I could get over there tomorrow for that.
Well, the thing is, as well, Paul, our casks with the Glasgow Distillery Company have been sitting there. Now, obviously, we were having this discussion about whether we took them at 3 years, and that was kind of happening, just as coronavirus hit. So we've actually just passed the 4-year mark. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I would say let it ride, and we're a kick in the pants away from 5 years. So I think that will be an interesting time. So that'll be next the end of next summer. They'll be in 5 years.
Certainly hope things open up by then.
Indeed. So that'll be fun. We'll incorporate that into the event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So this one is a marriage of casks. It's from the Whiskey Exchange, and 2 casks, and a good bit of marketing. Cask 435 and 456. Interesting that coming from the Whiskey Exchange, they obviously have bought the casks themselves, and they decided it's a halfway house. It's 51.1%. So it's not a cask strength. It's obviously been diluted down. Theoretically, if it was a very old whiskey, it could have gone down that. But knowing Glenfarclas as a whiskey, its evaporation rate per year is one of the lowest in Scotland, 0.05%, they say. And some whiskies which are taken to, let's say, these huge, where they take the whiskey from the distillery and put it in these massive kind of warehouses and on. It's different, but they put them in dunnage, don't they? They put them in these low slate roofed kind of buildings, and because of that microclimate, if you like, that's there at the bottom of Benrini, a mountain, it really slows down the evaporation. So that when I see 51.1%, I can say to you that this has been obviously slightly diluted down. Nice rose colour. And the nose, quite spicy. You get the typical Glenfarclas Christmas cake, chocolate cake, bit of, perhaps even a little bit of a nose of cinnamon. And what takes it, there's less of a punch of the alcohol, but it's quite light. Unusually so, perhaps, for Glenfarclas. But very nice dram. And I have to say, and I hate to say this, it's got a bit of cloves, orange. And quite complex. And I don't know why that is, to be honest. Marriage of casks, I think I'm reading too much into it. But a very nice dram, and if you don't like the full hit of let's say, a 60% 105, it's slightly less, slightly lighter, perhaps slightly less sherried than you would get in a 105, and yeah, a very pleasing dram.
Good to see you, Vic, incidentally. And yes, absolutely, you'll have a guest speaker slot, and me and Paul are staying on your couch, so that'll be cool.
Yes, that would be wonderful. I mean, yeah, I think drinking with you guys for the earlier hours, I don't know what we'd be tasting after a few drams, but even so, it would be a pleasure, I'm sure. Yeah.
That's always the risk. That's always the risk, I think, of these things, is scheduling the first speaker in the morning could be interesting.
You know what? Whenever I go to a conference, whether it's a dental conference or a spirits conference, I always allow for extra time at the end of the night. And you go to a conference and you learn about whiskey, or you learn about restorations or dentures or whatever. It doesn't matter. You're always able to learn something on a time schedule. And for the 3 hours or 2 hours that you're sitting there, and you're either in a focus group or you're sitting in front of someone's screen, learning the slides as they go along. But I will honestly say that I've learned way, way more in those conversations that's happened after the scheduled time, whether it's at supper around a table or up in someone's apartment or in the hotel lobby afterwards for 3, 4, 6 hours. And you might talk about dentistry, you might talk about life or whatever, but what you learn there in those hours when you're open to other people is far and above what you'll get on a slide presentation. So I always plan not to sleep that much, because I'm still learning before I wake up the next morning. Yeah.
Paul, do you ever go to the New York, Greater New York?
Never been down there. Never been down. I heard it's quite big, but I've never been.
4,000. I've been going every year for a long time. But even when I was a wee guy like Mike, from I think when I was even 30 years of age, I've been to New York, and I've been going every few years, and then I've been going every year, and I've been fortunate to present there as well. And it's a great conference, but exactly what you say, it's the people you meet and everything, and some amazing people I've met on an annual basis. My favorite conference, and I was gutted that it was called off, obviously, because of COVID, and hopefully it'll be there next year, because I've got a problem if it isn't, because this year I've got great staff. I've taken my practice manager before now, but this year I'm taking the whole team. I'm taking all my dental practice, including my associate, hygienists, all my nurses, they're going. They were on Christmas Day. I had a big envelope. They opened it, and as one of them cried. I mean, she could not believe it. That booked the hotel and everything, and they're coming to New York for 4 nights. Yeah.
When is that meeting?
Great. It's every year on Thanksgiving weekend. It's starts Thanksgiving weekend. And I would say to any dentist listening to this, go to Greater New York. You will be amazed by the exhibition, certainly for the UK. It takes hours and hours to go around. It's 5-10 times, I don't know the size of the thing, but with 54.
You might want a hip flask with some 105 in it to get you right there.
And you go to spin-off meetings, and years and years ago, I was made a fellow of the International Academy of Dental Facial Aesthetics, and every year they have a meeting. They have a lecturer, and it's a bit of who's who in dentistry. One of the regents in the UK is a guy called Professor Eddie Lynch. He's one of the regents, but there's some great people who go there. And anybody all the big names have been to it or been inaugurated at some time in their careers. And I was honoured to go there. And they do the ceremony every year, boring as hell, but they have a great dinner afterwards. And when they do the presentations, I have this thing. There's a very beautiful New York hotel called the Taj Hotel, chain of hotels. It's absolutely top. But I always disappear and drink a few drams in the bar and then return after the presentation ceremony. But that's another reason to go to New York, is taste good whiskey wherever you go. So anyway, what's your next fair, Mike?
Yeah, what have you got?
What have you got?
What have I got? I'm still finishing my 105 here. Do you know what? See, before I move on from the 105, is it just me, or do you find the more you drink whiskey, the more you feel less the need to water down the cask strength? I mean, earlier on in my whiskey exploration, I wouldn't have been able to drink a 60% proof straight without having to water it down. And while I'm all for adding a few drops occasionally to open up, more and more I find that actually after a couple of sips to get over the alcohol burn, I wouldn't add any water to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's just my palate or I don't know.
I've never been one to follow the crowd, and people, I know they say water brings out the flavour, and I like my cask strengths very much. And I've noticed now that they're all coming away to the American and over the pond, if you like, way now that the Americans do love their ice. And, still is, you can't add ice to a drink. And we'll debate this at another time about, I don't think it matters. And certainly go to the distilleries, they'll say whiskey's how you enjoy it. But I love that cold taste, and then it warms up in your mouth anyway. And I think the little you lose on the nose is hardly detectable. But I do like the beginning of it because I like the strength of the whiskey and I like it cold. And, I don't mind drinking it. And the whiskies tonight, I've drunk, obviously how it should be drunk. But I don't feel the need to add water per se to a whiskey to bring out the flavors. I just love it. And now the marketing's gone round. Like gin now is every flavor added to gin in the UK. You can buy any flavor. That I think whiskey's gone a bit about that. We're now finishing it in all types of barrels, and from red wine casks to rum casks to anything. And the most unusual one I've got is a Deanston done in Calvados. Finished in a Calvados. And you think to yourself now, with whiskey, it's also changing that they're bringing out whiskies that are made to add a cube of ice and everything. So it's so much of this is marketing. And if you actually ask at the distillery, the master distillers will say how you enjoy it. And I think we sometimes forget that.
Have you tried the Dalwhinnie Winter?
The Winter's Gold, yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to be put in the freezer kind of thing. And it is interesting because it does get very, very syrupy. and it does change the flavor profile quite considerably. And I know it's a gimmick and it's a marketing tool, but it's nice enough. I quite enjoyed it. It was okay.
Something different, right? You know what's interesting, Mike, is that getting a little sciencey for a second here. The more you drink alcohol, the less that your receptors will be accepting of the alcohol burn. Because what the alcohol does is it. You guys probably know this, that it actually there's a receptor that will be changed in the presence of alcohol. That the burn you get is actually a hypersensitivity to your own body temperature. So when you drink alcohol, or the alcohol gets on these receptors, it actually causes them to lower their threshold, so you actually feel your own body temperature from these receptors, which is really kind of cool. But what happens is, as you expose these receptors, the TRPV1 receptors, they will become desensitized over a course of a number of weeks, where that burn will start going away. So you will start, 30% alcohol burns a bit, or you feel the burn of the alcohol. Then it's 35, then it's 40, 45, 50, 55%. So the more you drink the alcohol at the higher percentages, the more you desensitize these receptors, and the less you feel the alcohol burn. Now, the side effect of that is that that alcohol is an anesthetic, a topical anesthetic. So as you go higher in the ABV, you will still get the anesthetizing of the receptors in the oral cavity, as well as the posterior sinuses. But it won't hurt as much when you drink it.
Gosh, I must have drunk too much.
Evening at Glenfarclas 1990. I'm not sure who gave that comment, but that sounds good.
That sounds a very, very beautiful whiskey.
So there's we were talking about the 105, which is 60% alcohol. I want to show you this bottle real quick. I picked this up in Campbellton as part of the 175. It's called now. You can help me with this. Is that Hielanman? Is that how you pronounce that?
Hielanman, yeah.
Hielanman, spirit drink.
Yeah.
So this is a 45-year-old Glenfarclas that was going to be part of Cadenhead's 175 anniversary, and it went underproof. So I believe it's 38.3% alcohol. So they couldn't bottle it as a whiskey because it went below 40%. So SWA said, no, can't do it. So was marketed as a spirit drink. And there's only 75 bottles of it that was available. So we were working with the Springbank Whiskey School that week during the Whiskey Fest there, the Campbellton Malts Festival, and the bottling manager, Mick, I believe his name was. He said, "Here, come with me." So we go back, said, "You got to try this." And of course, we go into the bottling room. We go into his office, and he has a safe there. It's about that big, right? And he's fiddling at the knobs, unlocking. Says, "Oh, all right." So whatever he wants us to see, it's got to be pretty cool, right? Opens it up and pulls out a bottle, which is about that full. So he says, "Here, take a drink of this." And we're drinking it. It's like, Jesus, what is this? This is something else. He says it's 45-year-old Glenfarclas went under proof. So they decided to bottle it anyway and didn't want to do anything else with it. So that was one day. The next day, we were working the Malts Festival, and we go over to the Cadenhead shop. And these bottles were basically wrapped up that looked just like American barbecue sauce. You couldn't tell what was there. And it said spirit drink, 80 pounds, right? And of course, people were just walking by it. And we saw it, right? So we go in, we grab a couple bottles and we go buy them. And they see us with their Springbank shirts on. Say, "What's that?" Says, "Well, we're not supposed to tell you." And someone comes around and says, "Is that the 45-year-old Glenfarclas?" Says, "Yeah, that's it." And within 10 minutes, they were all sold. I haven't opened this one yet because, once again, it's one of those special bottles that will be opened in the correct company. But it'd be great to have this against the 25-year-old, or, if I ever get a chance to try some of the family casts, it'd be really great to see how that would stack up. And even at 38%, even at a little under proof, it still had a tremendous amount of flavor to it.
Yeah, the family casks are an interesting thing. I bought one for a friend of mine. He was born in 1959, but I kind of got off when it was X £1,000 a bottle. But I did still buy him one out of the last century, put it that way. Interestingly, one which I'm not opened, and maybe we'll open together. An unusual Glenfarclas, but we're not going to be testing this tonight. You'll see it's unopened. I tend to drink most of mine. This is a 2004 distillery exclusive, bottle 17 of 657, 58% or 58.5. Interestingly done. There you go, in a port.
Interesting.
That is an interesting. It's a one-off, but picked up at the distillery, so not bought online. But maybe we'll share it one day, Paul. You'll have to bring a special one as well over, and that's one to open. We might even give a top to Mike over there. But an interesting one, an interesting Glenfarclas. For a start, the bottle. Interesting, dark. Not made for the English market. Actually made, if you can read the back, and if I get it really close, it's actually been made for the German market.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. I can't remember who I picked this up from. It may have been Masters of Malt. It may have been. And I should have finished it by now because I've only got perhaps less than a third of the bottle. So again, it's one of these which quite pale. Quite pale. Yeah.
For a port cask, it is quite pale, isn't it?
This one isn't port. This one actually, that the one I showed you is interesting.
Oh, okay.
This one is a sherry cask, 2004, bottled in 2017. I hate to say the whiskey exchange. It's probably Masters of Malt, I think. Yes, I think it is the Masters of Malt. Very interesting because this is typical Glenfarclas. Chocolate, the nose, very orangey. This is what perhaps I get from this one, as well as the Christmas cake. It's orangey, and it just carries on when you taste it. It just carries on that flavour of Christmas, and I suppose it's my Christmas malt. Good strength, 59.4, and it's lost nothing, even though I've probably gotten, it is a dark bottle. Certainly, we're getting down below when I probably should have drunk it. And yeah, it's just typical, perhaps a little burnt on the finish, but a very good dram. And as I say, I just love these unusual bottles that you get, but the problem is you enjoy them, you can't buy them again. But again, cask strength. I think that, yeah, the overriding taste I get, besides the usual Christmas cakey, is this orange flavour to it, real zest of it. Yeah, very much so. Bit malty, perhaps, as well. But I just found it very unusual that it was made for the German market. Yeah, auf Wiedersehen. Yeah.
I noticed there's a couple of notes there from viewers. Alcohol can be a general anesthetic too sometimes. Yes, it can be, but I don't think any of us here are actually licensed to do that on ours, are we?
Well, I'm meant to be working tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock start. Are you? Mike, are you working?
Oh no! We used to work a day or two between Christmas and New Year, but I several years ago realised that it was a fairly pointless endeavour because people make these appointments with good intention in Scotland, and then, as you know, New Year is a bigger deal than Christmas in Scotland. People would make their appointments and then get invited to a party or get too drunk the night before. So I had far too many late cancellations and no-shows, and decided that actually the whole staff and myself as well, it's a great time to just take that extra couple of days and have a good solid couple of weeks, 10 days, 14 days break. So I'm on call, but I'm off.
Interestingly, I'm going to ask the Paul here. What about, I love food, and I've got my favourite things to drink. But I like to taste other things, and there's a great thing now, obviously, chocolates, and I bought some to the table today, the famous name of Lindt, a touch of sea salt, and I think I love to take a dram and either go for a dark chocolate, and I think it really does lend itself to, particularly to something which a rich sherried one like, with a nice sherried malt, I think is always good. Or I'll go savoury, with something like a crisp bread, black olive there. And I don't think enough is taught about the, drinking a fine malt, clearing your palate with water, yes, and using something savoury in between. What do you feel about it as, let's say, I would like to call you a dentist, but also an aficionado of whiskey?
In terms of pairing whiskeys with food, it's not as easy as it is with wines. And part of that has to do with the more delicate flavors of whiskey that's overpowered by the alcoholic strength for the general person. But it absolutely can be done. Just hang on a sec. I picked up this book when I was in Scotland last time. Hang on.
But
incidentally, I'm now on the 15-year-old just now, so I have, I'm now just on the standard Glenfarclas 15, which I have to say, compared to the 105 and the 25, this is a lot more kind of caramelly, toffee, and a lot more buttery on the tongue when I'm tasting it. So certainly still has the raisins and the sherry and the fruits, but it's more toffee and kind of caramel in the 15-year-old than I was getting from the other two. Sorry, I was just filling in while you were. You were on that.
And it's a good whiskey. I don't have another bottle. When the Glenfarclas 15 we had here disappeared pretty quick. Once again, because it was accessible at the time and not that expensive, and it was easily approachable by even non-Scotch drinkers. I would love to get a couple more into the bar here, just because it's one of those things you put out there and people will enjoy it. Absolutely.
Yeah, really creamy. It's kind of Werther's original kind of flavor to it.
I wish I still had it the 15-year-old, and I'd bought a few bottles over my time of that cask strength 15-year-old, and I've got to say that would go down on my top, certainly within my top 10 of best ever whiskies. I think it is a fabulous dram.
What's the book, Paul?
So this is called for Martin Nouet. It's a table, whiskey from glass to plate. I can't remember where I picked this up. Nancy, well, I saw it. My wife picked it up for me. But it's a beautiful. It's got some fantastic recipes in here, but not just recipes for cooking with whiskey, but also suggestions on what to pair with it. Because when you talk about foods will have certain balances, they'll have certain flavors, and you can complement, you can contrast, but if it works, it works. And overall, we know what tastes good and what doesn't, and what works with something, what doesn't. So, for example, scallops and black pudding surf and turf with applesauce. The whiskey's to match. Peat and spice pairs well with black pudding, but a malty, grassy core is needed to converse with the scallops. So characterful, but with a sweet heart. So an Old Pulteney 17, a Craigellachie 17. That's two things that would be recommended for this certain recipe. So, what this author has done is basically, looked at the profiles of what certain whiskeys have, what the balances of the dish is and what complements each other. So it absolutely can be done. I will admit it's a hell of a lot easier to open up a bottle of wine and make it go with something that comes off the stove. But if you do it right, you can absolutely pair main dishes, not just desserts and chocolates, with whiskey.
This is actually, it's one of the experiences I was looking into when we were looking at courses and venues. Glengoyne, there is a restaurant right next to the distillery where this is actually what they do. So you have your meal and they have whiskey pairings throughout the meal, which sounds just absolutely divine. Just now, as we're all trapped and can't leave anywhere, to have an evening of pairing whiskey with fine Scottish food is just a dream.
I'm not too far away is the Deanston, which has, to me, a great restaurant on site. Plain type of restaurant, wholesome, homemade food, but fabulous to do your tour there. And I'm hoping that if we get the chance to do that tour, they did special with a group of guys they hadn't done it before. They gave us a VIP tour. It was ridiculously cheap at like £35, and I think they gave us 12 whiskies. I think we kind of waltzed out there. It was interesting of the whole group. So we had some of the Ledyig and things like that, which are part Bernarben, which are all part of their I forget who owns it, but it was fabulous that they gave us so many different whiskies. Very interesting day. So what are we bringing to the table now?
I'm Glenfarclas Night. That's my 3. That's the 3 I've got. So I'm just going to sip away on the 15 for a while.
I'm still finishing off some of that 21, so I'll certainly sip on that for a bit. One of the viewers said that's amazing. They bottle it as possible to bring up. As it is possible to bring up alcohol strength all the way. So there is a technique that can be used, and I believe it's called cold fingering. And Cadenheads, I don't think would be the type of company to do that, to bring something up. As much as want to be worth it, you brought it up to 40.1%. I'm very familiar with with back in 17 when that was out. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's not right. It's kind of like it's not cheating, but it's kind of greasy, right? So it is possible to increase the alcohol content of a spirit, but you could say at what cost? Well, increase profits. But sometimes when you look at the style of your operation or the honesty of the operation, and I would like to think that there's some companies out there that wouldn't do that just for the sake of getting a couple extra possible 1,000 pounds out of a bottle.
I mean, we go back, and if you look at the whiskies for auction, you'll go back into the 70s and you'll see what whiskey 37.5%. Lots of whiskies then this 40%. Mm-hmm. I don't know what year it came in. Maybe you can tell me that, but it was bottled a bit like you often see the cheaper vodkas in the UK bottled at 37.5%, and then you'll have your absolutes and 40, but some of the cheaper ones are 37.5. But whiskey, surprisingly, not that many years ago, was sometimes 37.5, and it's only the modern thing at 40%. But I did have, I don't know if I shared this little anecdote at Highland Park. I went up to Orkney a few years ago, and as part of the VIP tour, there were 3 of us, a husband and wife who had won it, and ironically were very rare because it was a couple of Orkney-based people who had won this competition, and they came on it. They weren't whiskey people, but they'd won it in a competition. And myself, and we were doing the VIP tour at Highland Park, and I was really excited. One of those great whiskey houses, and was so excited to go to Orkney, which is a fabulous place to fly to. I flew there from Aberdeen, and I went to it, and they gave you a dram, and you get it, you're swishing it around, and oh yes, I'm giving it, looking at the colour and everything else. And what do you think of it? And I says, well, it's this and it's that, and it's done. And I gave my opinion of it, and I was 100% wrong about this whole whiskey. And I thought, he says, don't worry. He says, we've never had one person, not one person. Now, I suppose I've given the game away. You'll go there. He said, no. He said, I'll tell you about this whiskey, because I was saying it was a refill cask, and it was this, and it was that. And obviously, it's watered down, blah, blah, blah. He said, no. This is actually a cask strength malt. It was found at the back of a warehouse. We didn't know what to do with it. It was a 68-year-old whiskey from 1968 that literally, because of the Angel's share, was gone down to 40.1%. And when I hear that number 40.1 that you just said, and they said, what do we do with it? And so they bottled it for the VIP tour. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting, but I got it totally wrong about what it was, but it's certainly interesting. And I know we're talking Glenfarclas, but if there's a whiskey which I will tell you guys, go out and buy now as one of the best whiskies, and I've written it on the website, is the Highland Park Batch 1 cask strength. It is absolutely phenomenal, not madly pricey. Highland Park, not known for normally producing a cask strength malt, and I would recommend anybody listening, go out and buy that bottle. It is just phenomenal as that peatiness, but not like obviously an Islay. And I would really recommend, go out, treat yourself to a bottle of Highland Park cask strength. You really won't be disappointed. I'm going to come back with my special, and I've gone down now to that. I can't. This is my special. This is arguably my favorite whiskey.
Sounds like something from Lord of the Rings. My special.
Whiskey legs fallen down at 64.1. And most cask strength whiskey is bottled at 63.5. And this obviously, because with the Angel's share, it's gone down to this, and they put it straight in the. This is just come straight from the cask without being. It's all watered down. It's so beautiful, so rich, and I tell you, this one, after the alcohol hits you, it's like a rocket. I mean, it really is like when you talk about drinking cask strengths and rocket fuel. You hit this. It hits you like a sledgehammer, first of all, and it almost takes your breath away as that alcohol hits you. And my favourite ever whiskey, and orange marmalade, Christmas cake, blackberries. A finish that is chocolate. It's just, to me, the epitome of the house. And I don't know if I can get a bottle. Perhaps it's one. If I even can't get a bottle from normal sources, I might even research buying one. It's phenomenal. 2008. It was this is bottle 99 of 656. And I don't know if they've got any more. And certainly when I go to Glenfarclas, I'll see. And, when you say you think you've tasted it all, the colour and everything, and I know you're into your colour. This is what Glenfarclas is about. It's phenomenal. I love these really high alcohol, and I think my receptors have been done in, Paul. They've been done in. I absolutely love these super concentrated whiskies, and I agree with you. The first time you actually take them, And even though I like my ice, all my ice has remained over there in the glass. And I do love this. And on a night like this, you just taste this, and it is, to me, the essence of Glenfarclas. And if there is a better whiskey out there, please show me, because I honestly say this is my number one of any whiskey I've ever tasted. But I'm sure there are others in the collection that will match. Yeah, it is good. So, guys,
that's obviously the problem, as you say, with unique whiskies or distillery only whiskies. But from time to time, it's even the case with whiskies that you assume are going to be around forever. I mean, one of my favourites was always the Arran 14. Oh. Cannot buy it. Cannot buy it. If I'd known it was going to disappear, I'd have bought a case. Mm-hmm. I was in Arran, I think, a few months before they discontinued it, and they were selling it at £48 the bottle or something.
Yeah, it was $72 Canadian here for a bottle of that, and that is an absolute steal. If you take the number off the bottle, which is 14 years old, 14-year-old Scotch for $72 Canadian. It was an amazing dram, amazing bottle. It's just really, really good. And when they took that off around here, my wife and I were heading across the province for something, and we picked up a few wherever we could. And I never regretted taking those bottles and gifting them to people. But I hope that they save some for me when I come by for a visit, because it has been one of my perennials around here. It was such a great whiskey. Well, it is a whiskey, but they decided to focus on the 12 and I think the 16 now, I believe.
Yeah. I tell you something though, the new sherry cask Arran is quite nice. I mean, it's a non-age statement, but it's a really nice sherry cask. It's got a good punch to it as well.
I appreciate that. And I don't know if it's in DC around here. I have to take a look, see if it's available.
I like the fact that Arran is a relatively new whiskey. Okay, and I do like these either distilleries that have just kind of reopened after being closed, like Glenfarclas. They were selling their new age spirit before it was selling it as spirit, as we say, before it was 3-year-old, and everything else they've gone on. And I've had a great one last year, a Masala cast, the whole time, and it was a Masala, and they're great. And even the new boys like Kingsbarns, which is not a stone's throw from St Andrews. And so I'm not a golfer. I played St Andrews many years ago as a 17-year-old. I have played golf. So, but I love these new distilleries as well. And some of them are, Kingsbarn, is all right. It's bourbon. But it's a decent whiskey, a decent dram, and it's certainly worth a visit to their distillery. And I do love, as well as, let's say, the daddies like Glenfarclas, like Glenlivet, Glenfiddich. I mean, people often say, oh, Glenfiddich, and I'm not a great fan of their 12-year-old. But you go to the distillery, and although it started like only a few years at £80 a bottle, and it's now gone up to perhaps $130, $140, they usually sell it as a 15-year-old. I've got a bottle, and I buy probably one most years. Their distillery own cask, and you fill it up. It's a bit of a gimmick. Out of the cask, you fill it up and take it away. Oh, a fine dram that is. And Glenfiddich is true to its origins and everything, but and it's got a fabulous restaurant. That's one restaurant. If we do this tour, we will be going to is the Glenfiddich restaurant. Fabulous food. And you can taste drams of some incredible whiskey, old whiskies if you're prepared to pay, so that you have the pleasure of tasting very special whiskies. But that's a fabulous place to do.
I believe from when we did our course with Vic Paul, I was quite interested in the story of Glenfiddich, because I'm sure he said that they were one of the first distilleries to go for the age statement. And to actually say, there's something special about a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old whiskey. And the genius of that marketing plan was that they didn't tell anyone they were going to do that. So when they did it, all the other distilleries had been selling and pumping out their whiskey, and nobody had been hanging on to it for more than 3 years.
Right.
So it took everybody, 2, 5, 8 years to catch up. And by that point, Glenfiddich became, the worldwide whiskey that people would drink as a malt whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very, very clever.
I mean, I don't know what Paul says about, you talk about the best tours, and I know people are listening and say, where should I go? And to me, there are few better than probably two of the whiskies I would point out. Balvenie, you have to book months in advance. Balvenie is the most incredible tour, and they obviously use some of their own malt. They grow their own malt as part of the whiskey making process, and that is a fabulous tour. And Dalmore, I always think of Dalmore as the Rolls Royce of whiskey. They like to think of themselves as the biggest name, the antlers on the bottle. And I've got to say,
it is nice.
Pretty
bottle is fabulous with the chandeliers when you go there. And I got them to open up on a day when they're normally closed on a Saturday, and I took these guys here. And this woman was so excited because there were a load of medics with me. I was the only dentist. And we were sat around, and it was just a fabulous experience. And they fed us all these beautiful whiskies and bought our distillery-owned bottles. And she loved it, she said, because she often got Russian oligarchs going in there, and they would just go like that and just drink it all down. And she said that somebody who appreciated, she really appreciated us as sharing the experience. And after we'd done that, we'd had a morning there. We then went to off-road driving. Yes. But it was legal. We're off-road. And that was an experience.
Just remember, Jeremy, you're live on air.
You're live, Jeremy.
Here as well.
And the GDC are probably watching.
No, it's absolutely legal. We're on private land. There was no problem.
Of course.
But we obviously were not totally hammered, obviously, but that was a morning and then a lunch, and then we went off-road driving. So there is a lot of talk we can go for if we do that to make it interesting. And
interestingly, obviously we were on Glenfarclas tonight. Glenfarclas had one of the first visitor centres to open in 1973, and I've got my notes here. They also have a room in Glenfarclas called the Ship's Room. Have you heard of the Ship's Room? And the Ship's Room is a tasting room that has panelling from the RMS Empress of Australia, which was a ship that ferried the last of the British troops home from India when the British left.
And that's cool. Well, we're talking India, are we? Well,
he's got some Indian whiskey. We've sparked off a whole other 1 hour of the show. You're in trouble when you see Jeremy's back.
This was bought on eBay.
Uh-huh.
A coffee set. And why did I buy this? I heard about it on eBay, so I bid and bought it. This is my old school, and that is my crest. And I went to Strand Grammar School, and it says "Sto ut serviam," I stand to serve. So why am I mentioning that? Because one of our old pupils, the girls' school exists, but the boys' school where I went has gone, and it was founded in 1600 and something. Great shame when these old schools are. As you can gather, I'm a nostalgic person, hence Glenfarclas, 1791. This school, one of the most famous pupil of our school, besides John Spencer, the snooker player, I think, and Len Fairclough from Coronation Street. The most famous was an very famous in Indian history, Clive of India. Robert Clive, or Clive of India, went to my old school. So when you mentioned that, I had to bring the tea set from my old school. Literally bought a few weeks ago. That's how nostalgic I am for things like that. So whiskey goes in.
Out of interest and still slightly on topic, the most famous FP of the school I went to was John Buchan, who wrote the 39 Steps and became Governor of Canada.
What?
So there you go.
I looked that up.
That was in the days before you had a prime minister.
The stories keep coming. I'm going to carry on with that because Jill and I were on a cruise, and we went from Boston. We went from Boston, and we went up through Maine, and we went through the St. Lawrence, and we went through to Halifax, and we went to Sydney, and we ended up in Montreal. But before we got there, we stopped in Quebec. And Jill and I were wandering around, and there was the castle, and something's going on there, said this guy to us. And Jill and I headed off there. And this guy said, "Are you invited?" Yeah. And there I was with my football shirt, with my daughter and my son. And we got through, and yeah, we're here. Before I knew it, I was behind a little rope, and I was stood there and didn't know what was going on. And then it's a lot of clapping and a lot of soldiers, and in their typical UK bearskins and everything. And the next minute, this person's coming along with a man and woman. And it was, I think, when I saw this people behind them, I thought, what's going on here? And the guy stopped and started talking to us and says, "Where are you from?" I said, "From the UK." And we started talking about children. And I says, "Oh, my son's not here. He's at Oxford University." "Oh, we went to care at Oxford," or blah, blah, blah. And we're talking. And I noticed that there was guys behind them, stood like that. And they were wearing the Ray-Bans and everything. And I thought, what's going on here? And I looked behind me, and there was others in Ray-Bans. And I thought, what's going on? And so after we had this conversation, this is the absolute truth, they passed by, and I turned round to this woman. I said, "Who was that we were talking to?" "Oh, that was the Governor of Canada." And so, you think about the United States, you'd expect security to, down, nothing. We just went right through, and we were introduced to the Governor of Canada. So that's my taste of the friendliness of the Canadian people.
We're a trusting lot.
Pardon me?
We're a trusting lot.
It is Canada. It is a little different. So he does equate to like 1% of the population.
Yeah, I think that it wasn't Donald Trump.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd have been very nice to us. But I did the actual same thing in Trump Tower about a year or two ago. I just literally, at all the time, managed to bull my way through into Trump Tower when it was all cordoned off. And I just says, "Oh, I'm British" or something, and they just let me in. And all it was with people, and I still to this day don't know how I got through there either. So good fun with you guys. Spend time.
If you ever want to know how to get in through a locked door, show up in a white van and carry a stepladder.
Yeah, high vis.
Yeah, absolutely. So, gentlemen, it's been. I did tell you we would go on a bit. He was hoping to have this wrapped up, weren't you, Mike, in half an hour? It wasn't.
I was genuinely looking for half an hour to 45 minutes, but I know that's. There might be one or two people that are still hanging on.
What are we going to talk about next time?
Next time, Paul, I am looking at bringing on Alistair Gillis potentially. We also have a few other invited speakers as well that we're looking at bringing on. I don't want to say too much at this point, but we've got a few special guests we want to bring on. So we've got 2 or 3 lined up actually. But Alistair Gillis has agreed to come on, and we'll talk about some Talisker and also look at some Cape Breton.
Ooh, Cape Breton! I got a few of those in my bar.
Indeed. So we need to get a date for that, but let's try and do it fairly soon. Would be good. But as I say, I've got 2 or 3 other names lined up. I don't want to announce anything that then doesn't happen. But we do have some very interesting speakers, folk that want to get involved and come on and chat with us. But again, we probably can't meander our discussions quite so much if we bring in a guest speaker. We may have to be a little more direct and allow our guest speaker some time. But everyone's heard our stories, so you know.
I mean, I think that's a very interesting thing about education in whiskey, and you know, particularly when it comes to, let's say, over the pond. And I'd be very interested. I mean, my knowledge of Canadian whiskey is almost zero. Absolutely, I think I've got Canadian Club or somewhere, and you know, it's very interesting. I'm watching the series of Mad Men on Netflix, and I've been working my way through to about series 6 or 7. And you see Canadian Club all the time, and everything else. And I think, you know, it's a different product. And the thing I appreciate about Canadian whiskey, you don't pretend to be anything like Scottish malt whiskey. And I have to say, you know, I don't just say this because of Mike, you're here, but the imitation, whether it be the Swedes or, dare I say, the Japanese, which you pay huge inflated prices, and I've rarely tasted one where I think, yeah, you know, this can carry itself off. I'm not a great lover, and I've tried so many Hakushus and this and that and their bickies. I've even invested on one on my earlier in the year when I was almost marooned in Canada. Well, not Canada, in Australia earlier in the year. I bought a rather expensive bottle, and Kamagachi, I think it was. So ordinary, and you know, listen, they're not. I wouldn't say total garbage. A Hibiki and a barrel and this and that, the common ones you see, but so rarely have I ever tasted one which I think is excellent. And if they are, they're probably a very fancy price. I don't know what you, Paul, with your experience, what you're feeling it towards the Japanese whiskies or other countries.
You know what? I think that people are trying to find their identity, and I think some countries already have. Scotland has its identity. Ireland has identity. Canada has its identity, and I think you can actually say that the U.S. absolutely does as well.
100% the U.S.
Yeah. You know, you look at Chinese whiskey and Japanese whiskey, and they're now, I think, you know, for the last couple of years, have decided to, you know, identify for what they were. Because we know that for a long time that, you know, and you want to talk Japanese whiskey was Scotch whiskey that wasn't in the bottle, that was taken over, modified in some way, and then rebottled. And now, you know, the Japanese whiskey industry has exploded. And I'm not going to talk ill of it, because I feel that there are some good Japanese whiskey. What I don't like about Japanese whiskey is the fact that it's priced out of a lot of people's price ranges. And that is not a product of the Japanese industry's of the market, and it's a difference. You know, because you know, we know that things have exploded in terms of price over time, right? Which is really unfortunate unless you're a capitalist. But over time, when you talk about other countries' whiskeys, you know, an identity, and I don't want to say being. Yeah, you're a bit there. Of course, you're different, right? If you put Canadian whiskey down versus an American whiskey versus a Scotch whiskey, it's going to be different. You know, overall, you know, there's Scotch whiskeys out there that are non-age statement, that are just blown off and sold 3 years later, or blended away with grain. You got Canadian whiskey, which is just, you know, minimally aged and thrown off there, right? And you know, even though Canadian whiskey is referred to as rye whiskey, there's hardly a you know, it might be 5% rye at the most of it, right? But Canadian whiskey, Japanese whiskey, Chinese whiskey, Australian whiskey, Indian whiskey, they're now, you know, they are defining themselves, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I really don't, because it just offers a different palate, a different character, a different taste that you may like, you may not like, but it's something to explore. Once again, I say this time and time again, I don't like the way that the market has pushed some of these products out of the hands of a lot of people who would love to approach and try these whiskeys out.
That's a very good point. Very good overview. I mean, I've tasted, the Taiwanese, Belgian, Swedish, Israeli, even. There are whiskies in so many different countries. I love about America is forgetting the American whiskies that try to mimic the Scotch. But bourbon, yeah, it's sweet, it's different. And I've particularly got a palate. You mentioned rye. I think rye is more my palate, perhaps less sweet. And I've been to some rye distilleries that are in a room no bigger than I'm sat in. Little bespoke rye houses. And when I've been into rye distilleries, but when I've been into in Seattle or somewhere like that and said, right, and they've put a load of rye whiskies in front of me. It's fabulous. It's like eating a new cuisine.
Do you know about Inchderny?
Go on.
Inchderny whiskey near Glenrothes. They're about to release their first rye whiskey.
Oh, really? I'll be interested in.
So it's the first Scottish rye that's going to be available, and I think there was a law that had to pass to allow it to still be called Scotch and be a rye whiskey. So the first, and this is what I love about it. The first whiskey, the first rye whiskey in Scotland is going to be called Rye Law, after the law passed to allow rye whiskey to be called Scotch. But Rye Law Farm was also where James Braid was born, and he was the guy who discovered hypnosis.
Yeah.
So I need to get myself a bottle of Rye Law whiskey.
Yeah, well, do me a favor and buy one for me too, because no way I'm getting one over here.
And also, you need to email me the details because I'd be very interested in that.
Inchderny. Yeah, it's just outside Glenrothes. Actually, very close to where Braid was born. So I don't know if there is more of a connection with the name than just the rye. I'm not sure.
That's it. Glenrothes, I think, is Glen Grant is around there. That's one of my also a favourite distillery of mine.
There's you talk about whiskey in general, right? Take a grain, you ferment it, distill it, throw it in the barrel, see what happens. There's so many different grains to use. And this is why I love, if Vic is still on, Vic, wow, malt master, right? I mean, like, I've picked his brain a few times on how different grains work and how different grains, their enzymatic activity and all these things, right? That make a difference on what you're getting for a product and getting for flavor and getting for alcohol content, which is, part of the bottom line for distilleries. But there's so many little parts of making whiskey, between the barley, arguably the water, the type of wood you use, the climate in which you age it and stuff. There's, you look in Scotland alone, right? Because, or the UK, and see how that changes, 50 kilometers away. Yeah. Now you take that and you go across the pond, right? Or you go across two ponds and hit another part of the world, right? Or hit the southern hemisphere. All these things, if you pay attention to what you're making, after a while, if you're not trying to bootleg what this guy's doing, you'll come up with a product that's not just unique, but also very enjoyable for a lot of people. And I think that's the fun thing of whiskey in general. I mean, it's a regional flavor. It's the provincial flavor. It's a country's flavor. It's a world flavor, and it just, you can pull it apart at so many levels that you'd never live long enough to explore it all.
That's whiskey in a nutshell. That is the beauty of it. Absolutely, yeah.
You've got like Cardew literally around the corner from Glenfarclas. So different. You've literally, if you go to Glenfiddich, right next door, within meters, you've got Balvenie. Martini, or however you want to pronounce it. And you think that these two are so different. And,
that's the thing. When you look at a map of Speyside, when we first started talking about having a conference, a Speyside dental whiskey conference, for the first time, I don't know why I'd never done it before, but I actually looked at a map of Speyside and thought, right, where would we hold this conference? And as I looked, and this is just I'm not talking about a special whiskey map. This was just an ordinary OS map of that region. And I felt like I was looking at a Disneyland map. You know, it's like, ooh, and then we could go there, and wow, that region, and then that's there. It's just, I mean, it's literally, you move a mile, half a mile, another quarter of a mile, and you're in another zone where you could happily spend a few hours. You know, it is the Disneyland of whiskey. Let's be honest.
Disneyland. Some of them I go in and they don't have visitor centres. Well, occasionally I manage to get a bottle from them, but you know, it's funny. Like Ben Riach was one where I went into, and they said, "Oh yeah, there was no visitor centre, but you managed to buy a distillery owned one in a Masala wine that I remember with great affection." You know, it is fabulous. That's the great thing about whiskey. You don't need all the glitzy visitor centre. You know, you just want something sometimes that's just a little bit different. And it's very interesting. During COVID-19, I went up there in the summer to Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon allowed us in, and we went up to Ballater, where we go every year. And so many of the including some like Cardew and Glenfarclas were closed. Cardew are doing a whole building job there, but Glenfarclas were closed. They're so frightened.
It still is, yeah, it still is.
So frightened. You think of these names of having a workforce of many. No, they have maybe half a dozen people preparing their whiskey, but they can't afford for any of them to become ill. It could cost them the chance of survival. So they put them in cotton wool, and they don't want them mixing with anyone. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of these distilleries were closed.
I tell you, one of our potential future guests is somebody who worked at Tomatin. Now, Tomatin is a phenomenal distillery to visit. Last year we visited a number of distilleries with the family, and a number of them actually wouldn't even allow children in the building. Tomatin had lollipops waiting for children who came in. They were so welcoming. Lovely, lovely little distillery. But also the phenomenal thing about Tomatin is when you drive into it, there's a little village, and the village are the workers for the distillery, which it's just so nice to see. You know, that's where everybody lives. That little village of Tomatin, they all work in the distillery.
Where is Tomatin?
It's up fairly near Inverness, just on the outskirts of Inverness.
I haven't been. I mean, I've been up there to Balblair and to Glenmorangie, but actually lovely whiskey, and it's not a pretty distillery. You know, there's nothing quaint or nice looking about it, but the feeling from the people there was immense. They were so welcoming, and you know, it was awesome. Awesome. And I have to say that there, and I have a bottle up here. I'm sure I have of Tomatin. I've got a bottle somewhere on my shelf. Their cask strength whiskey, phenomenal. If you like coffee, that's the one to go for. I think it's a phenomenal whiskey and one of the most reasonable price cask strengths on the market, but quality. Yeah, beautiful whiskey.
We had a beautiful. One of our first distillery tours was at Tomatin, and I won't share the story now. I'll share it when we're on the Tomatin distillery. But it's one of the times I fell in love with my wife next to me.
Okay,
I'll tell you that story next time.
No, that sounds interesting. I love these little distilleries. Like Balblair is an old one, and that's I think. The Angels Share, the film, was that film that you can find out, and I think that was shot at Balblair, quite a lot of it. Fabulous film if you like your whiskey, and about Scottish life.
It's a good film. Yeah, it is a good film.
Yeah, it's been great to speak to you guys, and yeah, it's been good.
It's been a good night, and you've managed to, I don't know, quadruple my allotted time. But I get to a point. I get to a point in these things where I think we're going to try and keep it slim, and we'll do our best. And then I have another whiskey, and I don't worry about it, and we chat. Yeah, and there's maybe 2 or 3 people still hanging on, listening to the nonsense that we're spouting, but they're still here. So,
well, you'll learn the most after the time is done. You know that, Mike.
And I think now it's just time for some of nature's own.
There you go.
Time to hydrate and get ready for work for tomorrow morning.
Indeed, you need to do that because you're on very soon. Well, I have enjoyed my visit to the Valley of the Green Grass. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Good to see you again, Jeremy. And once again, I hope that we're together soon.
Yes, and let's hope so. Whether it's this year or 2022, whichever sooner. I think this country will be vaccinated by the sound of the politicians within the next 6 months. And if we are, that will be fantastic. We'll open for business.
Okay. Indeed, it's gonna happen. And yes, so Happy New Year to everybody, and all the best. This is our year. It's gonna happen. Things are gonna be different. We need to do more of these, and also we need to do some nice, concise, short ones. I'm desperate to do a nice half-hour broadcast where we just sample a whiskey and people watch it. I mean, is there anybody commenting? Has anybody watched it from start to end? There's somebody here. Look, there's somebody still on. Well done, sir. Whoever you are, or madam, I don't know, a Facebook user. Well done, staying to the end.
Remember, it's only 7:00 in Eastern Canada.
You're just starting.
I'm just starting, but I'm not working for Monday, so I'm good.
I need to go.
Here's a question then for you both before we sign off. What are you going to bring the new year in with? What dram will you bring in 2021 with?
Electronic 21.
Oh, that's.
Jeremy's going for a wonder again. We're on for that's us committed to another hour. That's it.
I don't know. It really depends what I'm eating that night. I bought a very interesting Kingston done in a stout milk cask.
Oh,
yeah, that's an interesting finish. Very malty whiskey. But what I might open, I quite like to use the unusual. I might very well open a bottle. Here, let me have a look. Here we go. There's one I haven't opened. A 10-year-old. An unusual name to some, not to others.
Tuckers.
Yeah.
Tuckers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that may be that's the distillery owned bottle. Obviously a bourbon cask first hit. So that may be one to bring the new year into with. I've no idea what it'll taste like. 52. So it's not that heavy, but it's a cask strength distillery owned bottle. So who knows?
A friend of mine who makes whiskey, makes wine. He said he used to bring them in bottles to me, and he said, "Give me an honest opinion of what I make." So I'd honestly give him a good like a real opinion. And one time he brought me in a bottle, and it wasn't that great. So I told him straight on. I said, "You know what? It just wasn't that easy to drink." He said, "But did you notice that the second glass of it went down way easier than the first glass?" And he wasn't wrong. Whiskey's no different.
Well, and what are you going to bring in your New Year Hogmanay?
I'm not sure. I'm considering, given I'm hoping that we may get to the 5th year of our whiskey casks. I might bring it in with a Glasgow distillery company, 1770. The other option I have, a Christmas present I had, was a home blending Shivas kit.
Oh my.
Now it was one of the best Christmas gifts this year because it costs about £16, and you get 6 miniatures of various different single malt Chivas whiskies. On each bottle, it tells you whether it's vanilla or smoky. It gives you different citrus, different characteristics. You then have a pipette and an empty bottle, and you have to blend your own Chivas whiskey.
Brilliant.
Brilliant idea. A really great price, actually, because there's also a 12-year-old Chivas Regal in there. So there's actually six little bottles of whiskey, all for £15-16. So I may blend my own New Year drink.
I think I've got one somewhere that was bought to me last Christmas. A similar kit to what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Fantastic. Great idea. Great idea.
I've got one somewhere down there, which is sitting at the back, but I've yet to attack, if you like.
Yeah, kind of like your own little infinity bottle. It was interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very good, but I've yet to taste. But I think I'll give it a go.
Have you ever tried to do an infinity bottle, Paul?
You know, the problem I have with infinity bottle. Don't get me wrong. I think they're fantastic. They work really well. If for anything, the novelty of what you're putting in the bottle. But when I get down on bottles, I'm in the midst of it right now. I'm actually in the midst of a short bottle or a Heels Cull. So every couple of nights we'll find a short bottle and we'll basically finish it off. Or, you know, I put it in little sample bottles and share it with my friends and stuff. My point is that when you come to an end of a bottle, it's typically because it was good.
Yeah.
And drinkable. So, you know, I love the idea of coming up with different flavors and different, you know, mixes of what you have. But at the end of it all, it's at the end of the bottle, it's like, you know what, this is good for this reason. It was good for that reason. I'm going to share it off. I'm going to enjoy it. And then we're going to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I think that's a good sentiment. That's a good plan.
But I will say this, that and I won't share it with you guys now, but in the next couple of weeks, there will be a little bit of I'll be announcing something interesting. And you'll understand why the infinity bottle was not a big idea for me. Something big's come down the pipe. I think 2021 is going to be a good year to try some different things. And when it comes to blending and when it comes to different flavors, you'll see why I like to play with my own flavors. Anyways, that's for another.
Okay. That's very intriguing. And also, I think there's only probably about 1 or 2 people watching now, so you're not you're not going to give any great.
No trade secrets. Anyway,
there's more of us still online than there are people watching now.
Yeah, this bottle with you, or to share a few tastes of it. So who knows? We'll get together, God willing, and this damn virus. Yeah. Anyway,
but we'll you know what? We're persevered. We'll do fine. And when it's time to get together with other people, with each other, it'll be worth it.
Yeah. Take care. Be safe. Okay. And I hope that enjoyed it. Thanks, gentlemen.
All right. Good night, guys. And thank you to all who joined us.
Ciao, everyone.
Good night.
New Year.
Cheers. Good night. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.